Okay, so up next, as Emiliano said, we have our Green Entrepreneurship Panel. And to moderate this panel, we have Mark Paul, a New College of Florida professor. He is an assistant professor of economics and environmental studies at New College of Florida, a fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, a senior fellow at the Data for Progress. He's a political economist working in the area of inequality, environmental economics, and applied microeconomics. His research is focused on understanding the cause and consequences of inequality and addressing and designating the remedies to address it.
Thank you for being here. If you just want to introduce, you got the picture?
I got you.
Okay. If you just want to introduce what's the panel going to be about and then call your panels after you do it, that's perfect.
Fantastic to be here with all of you today. Thank you so much for coming and joining us for this fantastic conference. So this this particular panel is going to be about social entrepreneurship and the environment. And in particular, as all of you are hopefully aware, we're in the midst of an environmental crisis. We know that we need to rapidly decarbonize our economy, cutting emissions domestically roughly by half in the next 10 years, and fully decarbonizing the economy globally by 2050. This means that businesses are going to have to take a leading role in assisting us in decarbonizing in every single facet of the economy. So what does that look like, and what kind of opportunities does that open up for entrepreneurs is a really important question that we'll be diving into today. And in particular, we'll also be talking about the potential tensions between increasing consumption and starting businesses and the environment as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome my panel on board. We have three panelists joining us. First, we have Erica McCready. We also have Anand Palagar. And third, we have Jesse White. So if you could all come join us. So rather than me introducing them, I could sit here and say a few kind words about each of you. However, we want to hear from you. We want to hear first a little bit about your story. Everybody here is really excited about thinking how to take the next step in their own futures and their own stories. So if you could just start by telling us a little bit about what it is that you do, what is your story, and how did you get started, that'd be much appreciated.
Oh, is everybody there?
Yeah, we all have mics, don't worry.
Hi, my name's Erica, and I've never said this out loud, but I guess I'm considered a micro-influencer, which just means that I create content that has to do with sustainability and veganism, and that there's a substantial amount of people that are looking at what I'm creating, so I try to be really conscious about that. And my journey with sustainability and becoming more conscious all started a little over 3 years ago when I went vegan. I just started to realize, first with veganism, how much I was physically ingesting that I did not need, and then it trickled into just how much I was consuming every day that I didn't need, and I want to share my thoughts with others because I feel very strongly that most people have a similar moral philosophy or core values, but that we don't realize how much we're going against them in our daily actions. And so as I'm transitioning into a more conscious lifestyle all the time, I'm just sharing how I'm doing that so that others may be inspired. And more recently, I partnered with a company that's called Jackie. It's a personal styling fashion subscription box company, and they're local in Bradenton. A lot of their clients are in major cities, but we do have local clients as well. And I partnered with them to create a sustainable and vegan option for clients. So I might be talking more about that today because that's what I'm currently doing as my day job.
Great, thank you, Erica. And that's something that I think we'll all want to hear more about. So earlier you had told me that you're working within a relatively unsustainable company and thinking about how to make them more sustainable. Something that many of us will be starting our own ventures, but a lot of us will be working from within and thinking about how we could be influencers internally. So Jesse, please.
Hi, I'm Jesse White. I'm the owner and founder of Sarasota Architectural Salvage, and we'll be celebrating our 17th year this coming January. It's hard enough thinking about your life in terms of decades, let alone your business. So we've grown over the years. Well, sort of like if you don't know about our business, if salvage dogs kind of married American pickers, you'd end up with Sarasota Architectural Salvage. And so we now have 2 stores, our original downtown location, which is a big, huge warehouse filled with relics from old buildings and architectural elements and vintage finds. We have a boutique store out on University Parkway near the Fresh Market, which is an interesting demographic to be right next to. Their customer seems to be our customer, so that's kind of neat. And then we have a workshop where we produce, I have a team actually producing a lot of the furniture from salvage that we sell in the stores. And then we have salvage crews that are going out into buildings that are being torn down and pulling out materials to reuse and repurpose. My background is New College. I'm a New College alum, and I started in '89. No, I graduated in '89. We do it backwards. I started in '84. Good God. And then I went to graduate school up in New England. I got a Master of Science in Environmental Resource Management, kind of continuing this environmental path. Then I worked as a consultant in doing recycling type work, moved back to Sarasota and started Architectural Salvage. And I just say, I got into this because I have a great love of architecture, and I think it's a tremendous waste for it to be torn down and sent to the landfill. I also have just a tremendous passion for recycling and reuse, and one of the largest waste streams is the construction demolition waste stream. And so I feel that by having my foot in that area, we can make an impact in trying to reduce the amount of materials that are just getting recklessly wasted and sent to the landfill. And I also have a passion for the community. And so this is a type of business that's very anchored in the community. And so it's a way to give back. I use my stores as ways of giving back to the community, and it's also a way of constantly being in touch with the people of the community. So, so those are some of the reasons and passions and the story of what I do.
Hi, my name's Anand, and I wanted to build off what Mirda shared. My journey, I'm Indian obviously, but I was very much forcefully coerced to go down the path of either medicine or whatever else, and ended up dropping out of college. And in the journey, my journey today, I've never actually earned a paycheck from a company I wasn't involved in creating. And today I basically run 4 companies in 4 different areas. I have a creative services firm that focuses on building brands, customer acquisition, customer engagement, and creating outreach. I have a big play in the technology space. We have one of the largest Amazon partners on the coast of Florida with respect to AWS services. So we're implementing platforms, technology systems, e-commerce. We're helping drive customer acquisition and ultimately optimizing revenue for major brands in our backyard. I also run a benefit corporation. This is kind of the social giving back. We were one of the first B Corps in the state of Florida. And we're a little bit different in the sense that rather than set up a company and dedicate a percentage of profits towards advancing a social or community cause, we just give it all back. And so that entity basically, that's all it does, and it focuses on thought leadership. So we put on really great education, conferences, things like that. One of them is called PINK. We focus on environment and sustainability, working with the city, and some of the nonprofit foundations that are in the community, and really just outreach to educate this community and try to move it forward on issues or things that we think are relevant. And then what envelopes it all is a management firm, and our goal in that company, and this has been kind of an evolution, is really to incubate our future. So what are the ideas and what are the kind of businesses that we can find, identify, and build here in our backyard that will sustain us or that will create jobs of tomorrow. So one of the most exciting projects I'm working on is we're trying to do to the seafood industry, what Shake Shack did for hamburgers. So how do we find and ethically source seafood and produce a scalable model that is both environmentally acceptable, sustainably sourced, and is trying to kind of change the narrative on the overfishing that's happening in our backyard.
Great. Well, thank you each for that introduction. So I want to hear a little bit more from each of you about how environmental concerns played into the vision and execution of your ideas. And in particular, we're excited to hear about how the climate crisis has helped you reimagine what's possible, both for your current businesses as well as thinking ahead and what the next project might be. One thing I want to highlight here is given that we have to transition the economy so fundamentally, this actually opens up a tremendous amount of business opportunities that I think all of us in this room should be thinking about. So curious to hear what might be next.
Now I have to go sit down.
We can go in reverse order this time.
Well, I was just thinking about basically how extreme it's become and how obvious it is that it is a huge crisis. I feel that the opportunities I see with it becoming so extreme, I guess the most important thing is that I remember being little and thinking that I knew what vegan meant or thinking that I knew what being environmentally conscious meant, and they were very extreme visions in my mind. But now that it's becoming such a big deal and we need everyone to do their part, it's exciting to show, especially through the work that I do at Jackie, to show people that they don't have to change who they are. It's just about changing little things throughout the day. I know you guys are doing huge things in your businesses as you start them and whatnot, but I'm coming in and showing a group of women that I work with, and then all of the clients and new clients, that they can make a huge difference on their own, and it's just little choices throughout every day. So, yeah.
I think that you're talking about the green economy. I think that my perspective is the greatest threat to our planet and our future is the belief that somebody else is going to do something about it, right? And so we all possess the ability to kind of create our own impact, and I think that that's the bottom line, is that you have to start somewhere, we have to take action, we have to do something about it, and it's those micro steps that add up into the macro steps that really create change. So for us, what we're trying to do is kind of educate, illuminate, and create awareness around what are some of those micro steps. In our backyard, we have some incredible scientists, we have some incredible leadership, both at a state level and a community level. So we're working with the chief sustainability officers at both the city and the county. We're working with the foundations, the Brunswick Foundation, Gulf Coast, and Sarasota Foundation. And one of the ways we're going to try and affect this change is by introducing a platform to educate both the businesses and the entrepreneurs on what you can do. Because the thing is, it's very easy to cast a blind eye towards climate change. It's very easy to think that someone else is going to take care of it, and it's impossible to quantify the scale at which it's changing. And the thing is, it's when you begin, right? So I think to be able to inspire people to understand where they can begin, I work with a guy called Sir Robert Swan. He is the first guy in human history to have ever walked to the North and the South Pole, unassisted. And we take kids down to Antarctica every year. We take kids from all over the world down to Antarctica. And we show them the face of climate change because we hope those stories will go back to their villages, their cities in China, India, Australia, because it starts with you. I mean, ultimately it begins with each one of us in this room making a commitment to saying we're going to make a micro difference each and every day towards it. And so I don't really know any other solution to it. There's no magic, crystal ball. And what's finally really amazing to see is that corporations, like maybe some of you heard Jeff Bezos yesterday announced a massive pledge against the Paris Accord, and the fact that our I'm not even getting into the political side of what's happening with that, but we can talk about it for a long time.
Wow, it just is so incredibly complex. and the answers are so difficult. And so like you're saying, we each pick off a little piece that we can work on. And in a way, you know, our approach is very end pipeline. You know, like, I can't tell you how many houses I've gone into that are literally beautiful, beautiful, beautiful houses that have no business for being torn down. And yet, because of choices, they are being torn down. And so we are this last-ditch opportunity for capturing some of what I like to characterize as the embodied energy of the bones of these houses. You know, there's a certain energy that went into the production of all the components that go into a house. The wood that was grown, that was then harvested, that was then fabricated and then brought across states to, you know, be installed into the house. And so all that energy impacts has a certain embodied energy. And so we are right there at the end of the pipeline, literally, as sometimes when the excavators are about to crunch a building to extract a beam or flooring or windows or whatever it might be, to try to give that wood, which spent 50 years, 100 years, 200 years growing in order to be placed into this house as they're now coming down, and then to take that and then to give it another opportunity, because I guarantee you once it makes it to the landfill, there's no other opportunity. And so, you know, we are very end of pipeline, and we're very last chance, and we let a lot of materials go that we are just incapable, without the ability, without markets, without the ability to store, transport, or otherwise harvest these materials. We have to very, you know, with pain, let a lot of materials go. But thinking about that embodied energy and what can we do in our purchases that are reducing that amount of impact across, that's where we're at.
Great. So what does green entrepreneurship mean to each of you? And in particular, I want to hear a little bit more about how you try to make your companies more sustainable. So what are the specific steps? And what does sustainable mean? Because often when we talk about sustainable, we're talking just about the environmental impact, the carbon footprint. But hopefully we can have a discussion that might be a little bit of a more inclusive definition of sustainable and thinking about workers and communities as well.
I'll start. So I think I'm going to have to put my microphone down for a second.
I think of sustainability in terms of these like little screens. And like when I'm looking at a product, it's falling down. And each of these screens has a different layer of environmentalism or sustainability. So, you know, and some pieces will stop at the top, you know, because it's really not sustainable at all. It's a plastic widget from China, and it really has no business. Like, I'm not going to buy a brand new plastic widget from China and try to put that in my store. But then I let some things fall through that might be like an iron widget from China because it's made with recycled content, or it can be recycled. So it filtered through that filter. And then each different product, in my mind, and I'm probably the only one in my company, I've never really been able to articulate this in a way that I could like get everybody on board with this, but in my mind, every product that I am allowing to be on the shelves in my store has filtered through this sustainability matrix and has some kind of benefit to either the community or the environment, or even just when you think about it, like I have a lot of craftsmen that are creating materials. That's a local economy, and so that's part of sustainability, is creating these local microeconomies, like what Eric was talking about, that, you know, allow. So that for me is with the sustainability. So I think we each have to develop, because nothing is going to be ideal. There's no perfect thing. Like everything is just a shade of gray. You know, there's always some sort of something could be better, but something could be worse. And so we just have to keep in our mind that we're always trying to get to that most sustainable effort.
Sure. So for us, I mean, sustainability, I'm a big believer, where you stand is what you see, right? So you have the ability to create a position as an entrepreneur to create impact in the areas that are important to you. For us, sustainability is really important. All our offices are retrofitted with LEDs, white roofs, solar, you name it. But that's the easy stuff, right? The question is, how do you set a framework into place as an entrepreneur to say that we're going to go after, back, support, chase opportunities that exist in that space? And so that's part of our DNA, I guess. Like, so that is a very core value to us in our own regard. But I think as it relates to the green economy, there's so much opportunity today in the green economy. It is one of the fastest growing sectors. We live in the Sunshine State. Spot the bloody solar panel. Like, you just don't see them anywhere. It's insane, the fact that it has turned into a legislative issue about solar power instead of us embracing it as the sunshine state. So there is so much that we can do. You know, we have water issues, we have water quality issues. I just think it's a massive challenge. Our position is, let's find initiatives, let's identify things that allow us to take those micro steps towards it. How do we create momentum? How do we inspire people to do it? And hopefully this December we'll be launching something locally that helps get people to get excited about playing their own role in that green economy, and making steps towards helping save this planet.
Excellent, Erica.
So I did a bunch of little things too when I first started at Jackie. I brought in some cloth towels for the bathroom and the kitchen area and took out the last of the paper towels to save for emergencies. And I brought in reusable soap dispensers instead of buying new plastic ones every time. So all those things, like, I had fun doing that, and it was just, I tend to think that everybody's on the same page as me mentally when I'm like making these realizations and connections, but I'm always reminded that other people they're better at something, or they know more about something else that I have no clue about, but I can always show someone that these little things count and they matter. What I do for Jackie B is kind of like being a buyer, and so I'm always looking into brands and researching brands and what they do for sustainability. So it is really interesting, especially adding the word vegan and also using the word sustainable, because while not utilizing factory farming is a way better route in most cases, sometimes something that's made vegan is made out of materials that are like polyester, or things that are like basically plastic or will turn back into microplastics. So I personally believe that the greatest way to make a change is to set an example, and I do want to acknowledge brands that are taking strides that seem very genuine about it. I know that there's like a lot of greenwashing, and that's kind of my job to try to navigate and see what tiny brands are putting the planet and people, like ethical, like how their garment workers are being treated, or the effect on animals and the planet as a whole, just what they're doing, and that they're trying to make sure that they're putting all of that above profit. And I like finding those brands and then giving them business, because I feel like it's encouraging. And I know that a lot of the clients that Jackie currently has are much like my coworkers, where they don't think about it, it doesn't affect them, they aren't interested in sustainability, but when I try to incorporate it into clothing or something that they like, I see that I think it's like a feeling of empowerment, and just realizing that like I was saying before, you can still be the person that you are. It's just about making these little tweaks and being conscious and knowing who and what you're affecting every time you make a decision, or when you vote with your dollar.
Great. One thing I want to follow up on that Anand mentioned is about the idea of policy choices. So a few weeks ago, I helped lead a business roundtable that Michael Bloomberg put on in Silicon Valley, where there was executives and founders from a bunch of the leading tech firms. And it was focused on decarbonizing the economy. And one of my questions to them, because I primarily work in policy, was, what are the largest hindrances for you? And what they came back to was the policy decisions. So it highlights this idea in Florida, for instance, we're often, unfortunately, fighting against the state in order to pursue green entrepreneurship. And one of the biggest issues right now, I think, in our current political system is the lack of policy certainty. So you can imagine if the US government actually made a firm commitment to decarbonize, how many business opportunities that could actually open up, and how much more we could think about green businesses being able to take advantage of those opportunities. So building on something that Erica mentioned regarding greenwashing, I'm actually curious how you work with your customers and signal to them that your businesses are actually sustainable. So what is it that you feel like you have to educate them about or tell them, or do you feel like they come in very educated and very aware? And how do you make sure that your business isn't simply greenwashing, but is actually focusing on being as sustainable as possible? Jesse?
Well, actually, I think we have a big opportunity to talk more about our sustainability. I think that if people know me or know the story, they know about our environmentalism, or if they have some sense of what salvage is. But if they just walk into the store I'm not sure that it's absolutely evident as you walk in what is, more or less environmentally appropriate. So I think we do have an opportunity. I think a lot of businesses have a lot of opportunity to really do more. I mean, I think campuses have a lot of opportunity where people are need more information to be able to make better choices. So I think that's one of the things that actually we really need to do. I mean, if you go to our website right now, you might not even, I don't even know if I have a page there where I talk about my green matrix,
So I'm just curious, just to push you a little bit more here. For instance, do you ever try to communicate to customers, we divert X tons from landfills every year, things along these lines, to help them understand the environmental impact of buying something from you versus buying something, online from Amazon or IKEA or other businesses that are mainly importing goods and not thinking about reduce, recycle?
There's one aspect of our business that we do that very well, and that also speaks to your policy question. I was on the board of the Alliance for Historic Preservation, and we worked with the city to pass an ordinance that when a historic structure in the city of Sarasota gets torn down, the owner has to go through a process where they attempt to move the building before demolition, and if it can't be moved, then they have to hire a company to do a salvage assessment to see if there's historic resources that could be salvaged prior to demolition. And then, so our company has done a lot of these salvage reports for companies on items that are going to be torn down. So I've started telling the story a little bit more to the board. So after we do the salvage job for one of these buildings, we say, okay, so on this structure, we removed, 37 windows. There were 22 that were, broken or rotted, and I couldn't take them out. So I give a whole story to kind of, document the kind of historic resource that has been saved. And then, I see I have my homework from this panel. Erica?
Well, I'm just curious, for instance, how do you educate your consumers that switching over to these vegan lines has important environmental benefits? Or, how is it that you might try to convince these consumers to switch from a traditional line to a vegan line? And do you talk about the environmental impacts of that, or is it really just about the fashion and the environmental aspects of this are really secondary?
I did just complete the design of like a landing page on the Jackie site that tells more about the Jackie B option and like what it touches on just what it means to be ethically made as far as human labor, and then what it means to choose vegan over non-vegan as far as animals go, and then also how I'm choosing brands that are. It lists like a few of the ways that brands might be taking strides in the realm of sustainability, whether that be using materials that are like extremely locally sourced so that there's not as much carbon, or just the materials that they're using, or dyeing clothing with plants. But yeah, the people that I work with they're like the perfect candidate to easily fool. It relies on me to like do this research and praise them when they're making positive choices, and to educate them if I'm on the phone with an individual and I'm like, oh well, yeah, I like literally tell them like this will end up here, or this is made out of something natural, or just putting things on the website. But it really is, I'm working with people who just they're starting from scratch in this area of life, and so I take my job very seriously because they could be fooled very easily. And I don't know, when I first went vegan, I also spiraled into, at first it was amazing, and then I felt like more alive than I've ever felt in my life, and then it spiraled into a very dark, like rabbit hole of a place. And that's where you can go with the climate crisis as well, but being judgmental or like closing off the world does nothing. And so even when I know deep down that like they could make an even better choice, I try so hard to just be positive now, and it's helped tremendously, and I can tell that it makes a way bigger impact to just praise others when they are making a better choice, even if it's not the best one, or
Thank you. Anand?
So we're largely in the services business, so we don't really buy or source products per se. So, for us, it's really about taking a leadership position on it. And we're, at a personal level as an entrepreneur, what I'm trying to do is push that as far and as wide into this community as I can. So I sit on the board of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. We're pushing to make that a condition of getting a grant, as we grant money out to nonprofits. We look at businesses, we educate businesses on how we're doing it. And really, internally we have a lot of metrics and things. One of the businesses uses a lot of energy, and that is the infrastructure company, and so we try and offset that with carbon credits. The conference we put on every year in December, we repurchase carbon credits in order to offset the amount of flight time we spend with these speakers flying in and whatnot else. So I think it's just taking a leadership position on it and saying this is important. We can't solve it all, but we can play our role in it.
Excellent.
I just thought of one more thing. In Sarasota County, there's a Green Business Alliance, and there's a process to be a green business, and you go through checklists, and it's a good process to go through. Any businesses in the room, I recommend you checking out that program. And then there's a recertification after you've done it for a couple of years, and it really is a great way using checklists to kind of check your own practices once you set things in motion. And so, so that can kind of help you keep yourself from greenwashing.
So we were certified, I think in 2006, and we've been certified every year since, so it's 15 years. But just building on what Jesse was saying, next month we're going to launch a program. It's called Partners for Green Places, and what we're doing is basically putting a spotlight on businesses that have adopted a pledge and are actually doing things to basically create sustainability strategies, climate resilience strategies. Girls Inc. is a great example. They're the largest private solar array in the state of Florida. I mean, it's incredible what they've done, and we're really trying to illuminate that story and get other businesses to buy in, because I think the private sector has the ability to move that conversation forward, but they just need to know how. I think it's so easy to just be like, someone else is going to take care of it. I don't really need to worry about it. And so that's really helpful.
And it's so interesting to think about how decarbonizing your businesses could actually potentially open up revenue streams in the case of solar, for instance. And then also just really open up new opportunities to reach new clientele that you might not have previously reached. So what I want to ask the panelists now is one final question before we open it up for Q&A. And if you could all try to give relatively short answers, it would be much appreciated. If you could give yourself one piece of advice going back to when you started, what would it be and why? And when you all ponder on that for just a second, I can't help myself, I apologize, to just interject one thing, which is a lot of businesses these days have indeed been purchasing carbon offsets as a way to help offset their energy-intensive consumption. But the best environmental science research out there unfortunately shows that carbon offsets, by and large, have a negligible environmental impact. So one thing that's really hard is thinking about, often, we have the best of intentions and we're trying to decarbonize these companies and trying to push forth true green entrepreneurship. But sometimes it's really complicated, and sometimes when we're told carbon is being offset, unfortunately we find out often that it's indeed not. So just want to highlight the number of recent studies, one coming out from UC Berkeley and the other coming out from MIT in the past few months, showing this. So what would you have told yourself differently? Eric?
I guess if I could go back in time when I first started this whole journey, I would tell myself to not forget to be a teacher, because as I was learning so much every day, becoming interested in these topics and just always researching and looking at other influential people and reading and all of that, I sort of stopped. Like I said, I sort of got this idea that other people were either already knew more than me about it, or were on the same page and were learning everything that I was learning at the same pace. And I forgot that there are so many people who just don't realize that they have an effect on all these things. So, yeah, I would have just held myself more accountable to sharing what I did know with others, rather than feeling like just a student in the beginning. I'm still now struggling with that. I'm working with people who just are clueless about sustainability it makes me feel like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna fight this? time I'm like, wow, like every little bit counts, and just constantly sharing your knowledge with other people. Like you never know what they don't know, but starting conversations and being a teacher is really important, and I wish I would have done that more in the beginning.
Great, thank you. Jesse?
I think it's really basic stuff for me, like make the plan, work the plan, evaluate the plan, make the next plan, and really sticking to it, And then the other thing, and this goes for everybody in this room, trust your gut. There's so many times where I second guess myself early on, and I really wish I had just trusted my gut, made that hard decision, and then been able to shorten my learning curve.
I guess for myself, if I could go back, I would tell myself to, I think it was Gretchen earlier who said there was some impressively amazing leadership and experience in this community, and one of the mistakes I probably made as I look back is that I didn't have a degree, and I was kind of building the plane as I was flying it. I didn't really know what I was doing, and you kind of fake it till you make it, and it's a very, very complex challenge as an entrepreneur, because on one hand you think you're going in the right direction, on the second hand you're absolutely clueless, you're scared. And there's a great quote by Bill Gates: if you're not in this industry, he was talking about software, but I think it applies to any entrepreneurship in this industry, if you're not running scared all the time, by the time you realize you're in trouble, it's too late. And so that philosophy kind of made me a little more closed off to seeking mentors and talking to people about what I was trying to do, and instead trying to navigate my own path. And my advice to myself would be, go out there and talk to people, always take a meeting, which we do, and find those people that can help you, because they're here, they're right here. And I know everyone on this panel will absolutely help any of you with whatever you need, but I think that's probably one of the most overlooked things. It's okay to be misunderstood. It's okay to be misunderstood for long periods of time. That's my story in a nutshell. But I think if you don't seek out the help and the guidance and just input from people who've done it before, you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache. Like I said, I never worked for anyone. That was a huge mistake too. I should have probably got another job first before I try to start my own company, but that's all that story now.
Excellent. So I'd like to turn it over to the audience. We're excited to hear your questions. All right, we'll start with this gentleman in the back in the middle.
So I work with a nonprofit, and we do a thing called Eat Local Week. And one of our things is that we have trouble engaging people that we don't already engage. Like getting out to the people that are not the choir, and engaging with new communities. And do you guys have any suggestions on how to involve people that aren't usually? Because there's so, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, whatever. People want to support local business, want to support local food, want to, so we go across the spectrum. But engaging those people is sometimes hard, because we're kind of speaking to the environmentalists usually, people like this workshop. So I was just curious.
Let's just take one more question as well, and then we'll go ahead and answer them. Any other questions from the audience?
I think it's, I think y'all are aware of, I just want to mention that y'all want to make people aware of the national efforts that are ongoing that really touch individual homes, like Co-op America, which is now Green America. That's the national group of over 3,000 businesses that provide green products, and they've been growing the local green economy now for over 40 years. There's that. And then there's the Holistic Chamber of Commerce, and that's a national organization. It's a B Corp from California. We now have a Sarasota chapter of that. So you really need to reach out and understand there's a lot of networks that are in play nationally that we're also engaged with here locally.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have responses?
Sure. I think, so we live in an incredibly noisy world in this community in particular. There's a lot of nonprofits, there's a lot of messages, there's a lot of different perspectives that are shared. And I think what often happens is you get lost in the noise if you can't be crystal clear in articulating what your value proposition is to the community and why this audience should engage with you. And I think that's really where it begins, is to really distill down why it is, like start with the customer and work backwards, right? So why is it that this new community should care about what Apple is doing, and what are the motivating factors that are going to influence them to potentially get involved and care about this cause, or whatever it is, and I don't really know, so I'm just kind of making this up as we're going, but I really do believe it starts with that. It starts with clarity and message, and it's amazing. Like, I see so many organizations that cannot articulate what they do clearly and succinctly in a way that makes sense to the customer they're trying to talk to, and they wonder why they're getting no traction. And quite often I think it starts that, like, what is the motivation for a customer or an audience or a community to engage with you, and why should they care? You know, and it starts with why. Gretchen mentioned that book, Start With Why. Fantastic book by Simon Sinek. Great TED Talk, I would highly recommend you watch it. But starting with the why is probably one of the best ways that you can kind of clean that up and start to attract those communities into your arena.
We address this in a couple of different ways. We actually have a competitor down the street from us that opened up, and so there's a lot of confusion about which store is my store, and so that's been a huge challenge for us. And so to sort of answer the question that Roger had, and also address our competition issue, we have a lot of events in our store, and so when we have an event in our store, it brings in a whole audience of people who are there because of the nonprofit that they are interested in, and then they're coming into my store to kind of, and they get to see what we're all about at the same time. And so the other way to do that as a nonprofit, it would be to partner with other nonprofits for your events, so that you're both bringing people and you both have a new audience to speak to.
Any closing comments, Eric?
Oh, I just think about how to utilize Instagram all the time. I was going to ask if you had one.
Yeah, we actually just started an Instagram, and we do Twitter, we tweet, and we just started the Instagram.
Yeah, there's a lot of garbage, but more and more people are talking about, like, following things that you're passionate about and unfollowing things. Just because we spend so much time doing it unconsciously, and it's just like television. But yeah, if you can, also if you can get like an actual person, whether it's you or somebody else in your group, to create stories and just talk to the camera who is really passionate about what you guys do, that attracts people like crazy, I find. Like, just being really real and being a normal person and talking about what you're passionate about attracts other people.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I want to give a round of applause to that. Over to our two organizers.
Oh my God, can I take a picture? Are you guys okay if I take a picture and post it online? Yeah, okay. You can just put your head down if you don't want to be. Just look like little dots, but it'll be cool.
So we want to thank you. My speaker working, there we go. We want to thank you for being here. You know, really, the moment that we spoke to each one of you, it was such a wonderful experience to know that each one of you was going to be here because of the different experiences. If you guys haven't noticed, we have like someone that has tons of experience, someone that is, you know, in the middle, and then someone that's just getting started, right? And that's what the idea was with all of these panels, to have a little bit of each experience, so that the crowd could actually relate, you know. And the next panel will have a guy called Olivier, and he's 24 years old, so he'll also share from his experience. So just wanted to point that out, and thank you for being brave and being here.